Well, it got to the point where there were so many duties in the temple that some people had to become full-time. So when you were full-time temple, you worked about 20 hours a day.
We would always try to let each other know next day, well, how long did you sleep? Oh, I slept 2 hours. You only slept 2? Well, I slept an hour and a half.
And then Sunday we'd have a Sunday morning service, and then around 1 o'clock, hop on the buses, drive up, drop people off in San Francisco, and drive up to Redwood Valley.
The longest I ever stayed awake was 6 days, and that's with no coffee, no nothing.
It changed over the years, but it was always busy.
Being in an environment where you're constantly up, you're constantly busy, and you're made to feel guilty if you take too many luxuries like sleeping, you tend to not really think for yourself. And I did allow Jones to think for me because I figured that he had the better plan. I gave my rights up to him, as many others did.
How hard was it doing that job?
Words don't describe it. I mean, you know, there was 2 to 3 year periods where if I slept at all, it was in an office chair or on a floor or 2 hours in a bed. I very, very rarely saw Mark.
As older people joined, it took a year or so, and he'd convinced the people that, you know, he was doing so much in the community. And so why not, rather than just tithe your 20%, why not sell your home? Give the money to the church. And that is what people began to do.
People were persuaded to remortgage their homes, sell their homes, cash in the policies that were supposed to pay off their mortgages, borrow against their pensions, sell their family jewels, borrow from their families, sell their cars. Anything you can possibly imagine that a person could do to raise money, people were persuaded to do to pay into Scientology.
We turned our paychecks over every time we got paid. And then we got an allowance, $5 a week.
John Buchanan was a Scottish landscape gardener who worked in Germany. He piled up huge debts with several German banks to buy Scientology courses and materials. To escape his debts, he committed suicide.
One of the powerful things that Jim used to keep us to not think was that we were never really allowed to speak with one another. I'd look around and I'd say, am I the only one that feels this way? I learned eventually not to say anything to anyone.
Because if I just up and left, my family would never speak to me again, my mom, my grandma, my brother. So I wasn't about to do that. If I sided with them and said, go ahead and leave, they wouldn't be able to leave. And I'd be in big trouble. You know, I'd be in ethics.
Jones was in the pavilion. At one point, he said, well, of course you can go if you want. But clearly that was not the message. The message was, you are betraying me.
Richard borrowed £3,000 to pay for Scientology courses. Tony Clark and other Bournemouth mission officials wrote Richard several letters. Some of them distressed Richard so much he tore them up on the spot. Others warned him of the consequences if he quit Scientology and asked him to come into the mission.
They phoned him 4 times a day, 5 times a day, for an hour each time on the phone. And while he was on the phone, he was shaking, he was a bit nervous, obviously frightened of something.
Richard was anxious about the fact that he was wanting to leave Scientology, and he was concerned that they were not letting him leave and that they were threatening to print personal information about him. That was what he voiced to me.
Much later that night, Richard parked his car by the Clifton Suspension Bridge in Bristol. At 10 minutes to midnight, he jumped to his death.
Every night at some point, his voice would come over the loudspeaker and he'd say, I'm sending somebody out tonight. Somebody you know, somebody you trust. And they're going to act like they want to leave. But this is a loyalty test, and you need to turn them in.
A father would turn in a son, a husband would turn in a wife, a small child would turn in a parent. There was no freedom to express to one another what was going on because everything was suspect. The most forbidden thing to express was to leave.
He had a real issue with separation. People could not leave him. He took it as a betrayal to the cause and to him personally.
He said, I really want to get away from here, and by Christmas I will be gone.
By Christmas, do you want to be gone?
Yeah, well,
by Christmas, do you want to be gone? By Christmas, do you want to be gone?
I would ask you, could I go home to make a trip to see my people?
I have the power to send you home by Christmas, but it's not on Transworld Airlines. It's blasphemy. It's blasphemy to talk about going back when you have not been given any approval. Do you want to go home?
No.
Well, then be seated and shut your mouth and don't be in my face anymore.
When Mark and Claire met, they were posted to one of the church's most secure Sea Org facilities at Hemet, 2 hours' drive outside Los Angeles. The facility is surrounded by high fences topped with razor wire. What did the church tell you about people who wanted to leave?
That people in the Sea organization have foregone the right to leave, and that was reiterated on many different instances.
Let's fill this atmosphere with warmth and love.
We thought of ourselves as one big family that did handle our own discipline. I was in a lot of the meetings where people were spanked or beaten, and I was slapped once also in a public meeting.
People were brought up front and asked to, they had to tell who they'd slept with and who they'd sneaked off to a restaurant with.
It wasn't a week that went by that I wasn't called up on the float because of my behavior, because of my attitude. Stanley Clayton, up front center.
He would ask people, what do you think we ought to do with them? You think I ought to get a good boxing? And then you'd get a resounding roar, yes.
You might fight 5 people in one night. Well, you know, you're very tired. I've seen situations where they actually knocked the person out and actually took water and threw the water back on, woke him up and woke him some more.
I had welts really bad, and when I went to work the next day, one of my employees noticed the welts when I sat down, and I just broke down and told her. She didn't even know I was People's Temple. And she called the manager of the station up, and they talked to me about leaving. I couldn't say goodbye to my son and my husband, because at that point it was like the Gestapo. The families were turning in each other. If I had said goodbye, one of them would have reported me.
In late '03, there was a beating every day. Next thing I knew, I'm being smacked in the face and knocked down on the ground in front of all these people. This is the Pope, you know, knocking me down on the ground.
The leader of the church, David Miscavige, had implemented things that had trickled down even to the organization that I was at.
David Miscavige was the one leading this whole physical violence kick, and it was him who was beating people up.
And if it wasn't him doing it, it was from him inciting others to do it to others.
I had been in the temple for just a few months. I was sent backstage in Los Angeles to get something for somebody. I don't remember what. And Jones happened to be coming out of his room, and he said, "Hi, Tim, how are you doing? How's it going? How do you like everything so far?" And, "Oh, I like it a lot, and, you know, it's really cool." I don't remember exactly. And he reached up and kind of patted the back of my neck, and he said, "I'll you in the ass if you want." And I just kind of stammered, no, you know, no. And he said, "Well, you know, if you ever want that, that's okay, you know, just let me know and we'll do that."
How close is he with Tom Cruise?
Extremely close.
How close?
Unnaturally extremely close.
I think that Jim Jones took his group down there because he was afraid to face the publicity and answer the questions here in this country. I don't think that he feels confident having people talk to their relatives. I think the only way he can survive and sustain what he started is to isolate all his followers from this country and from their families.
The concerned relatives were the ex-members who wanted other family members still in the church to know they could leave. They wanted them to feel that there was an outside world, that Jones was wrong about telling people they could never leave the church and that they'd be treated badly in the real world.
I left. See you, not your long time. Glory, Mark. Free Cedu. Oh, wait, no. Don't go in! Good choice! Good choice! That's a win for Anonymous. That works too.
My court case in the United States is basically alleging that they should be paying minimum wage. That's pretty much it. That there's human trafficking going on, which is basically holding people to work for a wage that's less than what they should be being paid, and not allowing them to just leave if they want to leave.
I came to realize that if no one ever has the strength to stand up and say the truth of what went on, then it will only continue and get